We're here for 5 Minute Friday. This week's episode is with Ashli Watts, Senior Vice President of Public Affairs at the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. And we're here actually at the site of Metro United Way following a screening of a documentary called No Small Matter about the importance of early childhood and child care. Ashli's been on a panel this afternoon with a number of other community leaders as a result of the Kentucky Chamber's focus on early childhood. So we're going to have a conversation with Ashli about the Chamber's focus on education, long-standing focus on education at this point. We're so grateful for the Chamber's commitment to education as it relates to the workforce and Kentucky's economy. A couple years ago, the Chamber hosted and has supported a working group called the Business Education Roundtable. So Ashli, will you share with us a little bit about the Business Education Roundtable, who's involved, and the product that resulted that the Chamber released last fall?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me. I know the Chamber and the Pritchard Committee have had a long-term relationship on education issues. As you mentioned, education is our top strategic priority at the Chamber. And so several years ago, we had a chairman, Will James, who was president of Toyota, one of the largest manufacturers, obviously, in Kentucky, and he piqued his interest to kind of pull together business leaders and the education community to see really kind of what strides had been made. And for a little bit of context here, back before I was working in Frankfurt, but back in 1990 when KERA was passed, the business community was really at the forefront of that effort. They were the one really kind of making the deal at the end of the day, supporting the additional penny on the sales tax to really make sure that we had quality education here in Kentucky.
That's right. And UPS.
Exactly.
Just want to shout out to those.
Absolutely.
UPS, Humana, and Ashland.
Yes, many corporate leaders in Kentucky really took that step and became the leader for education to get us to where we are now. And so Will James, along with our president and CEO, Dave Atkinson, really said that they wanted to get together business leaders and education leaders and put together kind of a think tank over the next couple of years to see how we can move the needle on education. And not just move the needle, but have a generational change. Not just, a bill here and there or a little extra money in one budget cycle, but really how can we have that next big generational change like we did in 1990 with KERA. And so you've been participating on it, I think, for the last several years, and it's just kind of grown. We have the top leaders from various sectors in Kentucky when it comes to the business leaders. So we have someone from manufacturing, Toyota is obviously involved, healthcare, St. Elizabeth's Hospital, we have logistics, UPS is involved, construction, Messer Construction, financial institutions, I think a bank is involved, JP Morgan Chase. So we tried to find a business from every sector that was really going to play a role in this, along with the top education leaders in Kentucky. So the Education Commissioner, the Secretary of Education, the Secretary of Economic Development, Pritchard Committee, obviously, and some other organizations. So through this process came the Top Tier for Talent, which is a report.
Just hold this up.
Yeah.
It's a great report found online.
Found online. If you need any copies, the Chamber has plenty. We'd be happy to send. But that really is the cumulative effort of the last several years of work, kind of boiled down, and we really kind of took the big picture and all the pieces that everyone wanted and boiled it down to 4 key principles. And that is 1, invest in early childhood education, which is what we were here at United Way talking about today. The second was reinvent high school. Make sure that we are teaching high school students what they need to know for the next path of their career, for their secondary learning, for the next job. Third, make sure that everyone has a marketable credential or degree. Make sure that it's a degree that's going to mean something, or a credential that we have a job for here in Kentucky. And then lastly, make sure the business community is at the table. Make sure that we do kind of have a role in this and have a responsibility to make sure we're telling the education community and we're working in collaboration to let them know what jobs are going to be in the future. So those are the 4 major goals. There were lots of things thrown out. There are lots of other goals underneath those 4 goals, but those are the basic 4 principles that we have come up with that now we have to implement.
That's right. That's right. The hard work is ahead with the implementation, but consensus is there. So
absolutely,
that's hard work as well. well. So we were pleased at the Pritchard Committee to see that the goals that resulted are wholly aligned to our strategic plan that was derived from a number of regional meetings across the state and citizen participation and input into that strategic plan. So it's clear that Kentucky is responding to needs from a broad base of consensus, and that's exciting. But to your point, now's the time to really put the meat on the bone.
Absolutely.
4 goals. What do all the details look like under those 4 goals? And the first one that we're here, well, the one we're here to talk about is goal 1. You mentioned early childhood, and that's inclusive of 3rd grade and looking at greater proficiency in 3rd grade math and reading. So Ashli, just share with us kind of the details in that goal and where the Chamber is hoping the Business Education Roundtable will go.
So I'm really excited about that first goal. In addition to kind of the Chamber work, I said I am a working mother of 2 small children. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and so I kind of live this life. We hear the stories about people not being able to find childcare, and I said I've often taken conference calls with my kids, bribing them with something to keep them out of the room so I could work, and I said every working mother kind of has these kind of stories.
And I imagine you giving them something like really sticky and gooey
Probably.
that keeps their mouth
Exactly.
really active.
Exactly. So I do think it's something, though, that the workforce is changing. Our workforce looks much different than it did a generation ago. And so how do employers really adapt to that? We want skilled people, skilled workers, and so really for the business community, it's twofold. It's not only serving our current workforce, like myself, who has childcare needs, and we have to make sure our kids are in quality childcare while we go to work, but it's also making sure we have that workforce for tomorrow. Like we've talked about, you have to have that strong start. You have to have that foundation. And we know so much more about the early brain than we did even several years ago. And so we often say, when you know better, you do better. And so we know better. We know that early start for kids is critical. 50% of children entering kindergarten are not kindergarten ready. And that's really unacceptable. And so how do we move the needle? How do we change that? So from the business community standpoint, it's not just dealing with the workforce of today, it's making sure that we have a quality workforce for tomorrow. Studies also show that when people have early childhood education, they're less likely to get into trouble, they're less likely to go to jail, they're less likely to be on Medicaid, have healthcare problems. So all these things that we're fixing down the road can really be prevented if we would just invest in early childhood. And I know that's kind of a bold step, I think, for the business community to say, but we know the research is there. Business leaders like a good investment. We like to invest in what we know works, and we know that investing in early childhood works. We often say, I think it's $1 of investment in early childhood education then produces $16 into the community. So it's a good investment. It educates our workforce. It helps the working families of today. And so I'm pretty proud that it's kind of the first block that we're looking at in our top tier for talent, that all of these groups have been able to rally around early childhood education and what do we do about it.
Yeah, great. And another point that's made in the report is that we're now 41st in the nation for preschool enrollment. So we're fifth from the bottom in poverty. We're still only enrolling about half of our kids in public preschool, and so the statement is kind of made here that we really need to reverse that.
Right.
A decade ago, we were, I think, 28th in the nation for enrollment in preschool. So we've declined significantly, and that's of concern.
Absolutely.
Similarly, in 3rd grade reading and math, as I think we've heard repeatedly from leaders, it's a critical, basic, foundational skill for later learning. Certainly the business community needs folks, our post-secondary institution needs folks who have those basic skills plus, and we need to increase that reading and math proficiency rate, and the report calls that out.
Absolutely.
That we're teetering plus or minus around 50% in those 2 areas, with significant achievement gaps if we look at the results for different populations of students across our state. So a lot of work to do there.
Yes.
The other point that I think where this connection is so rich that you've mentioned, Ashli, with the business community, and we heard in the No Small Matters documentary, is those executive functioning skills that happen in early childhood.
Almost like essential skills that we've worked on.
That's right. And I think Will James was really attracted to that at Toyota, recognizing that from the workforce standpoint, from the business standpoint, it's not just about basic skills.
Right.
It's about people coming to the table ready to problem solve, to be creative, to communicate well.
Work as a team.
Work
Yeah.
as a team, all of these things. And that's part of goal 3
Yes.
around a meaningful high school diploma. And it starts actually in the early years.
Absolutely.
It then results in progress. Actually, that's goal 2, I think. That then results in progress in goal 3,
Right.
post-secondary attainment.
Yep.
So it really starts there in goal 1. If we can get that right, we're doing just
Right.
an ounce of prevention, right?
Absolutely.
Plus.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I think it's great that it's the first block, and to me it's kind of that foundation like we talked about. If we don't get this first block right, if we don't get early childhood education, quality early childhood education, those other blocks are going to be very hard to attain.
Yes.
And so I think if we get it right now, it'll be easier down the path to make sure that we achieve those other blocks.
Yeah, for sure. So examples from the business community, as the chamber has been talking about early childhood, child care, issues with child care, you have some bright spots across the state where the business community is stepping up and responding in their own unique way.
Absolutely. I think with any kind of issue like this, oftentimes the business community gets pretty creative on how to find their own solution. And so we know here in Kentucky that there are things, child care deserts, basically, where there aren't any quality childhood education centers or not enough. We also know that people that are working parents are often looking for some kind of creative balance of making sure they can have a good work-life balance, making sure their kids are being taken care of, have that quality childhood education, but then also make sure they have a job they can go to. And so one great example that we have found that have been kind of a great member of the chamber, a great example is the hospital in Rockcastle County, which is kind of down in southeastern Kentucky. And they have obviously lots of employees that work sometimes, around the clock. It's a hospital, so you have to have people there 24 hours a day. And they realized that a lot of their employees, the doctors, the nurses, the administration staff, the CNAs, needed childcare, and that was a huge barrier for the workforce. They wanted to work at the hospital. The hospital was a great employer, but they had these barriers of not being able to find quality childcare.
And non-traditional care.
In non-traditional
That's second
care.
and third shift care.
Exactly. And so what did they do? They opened up their own childcare facility within the hospital. And so now they have a quality childhood early education center in the hospital. So if you go to work there, you can drop your kids off, you can check in with them, they know they're safe, and in return, the hospital has really dedicated employees. They have employees that don't miss as much work. There's no, crisis of, oh my gosh, I can't find a babysitter to work this shift. And we know through studies that if you invest in your employees like this, if you kind of give them that as part of their benefits package, or at least have that resource there, they're going to be loyal employers. They want to work there, especially if you have your child within the building that you work. That's a great perk for a working mom or dad. So it's kind of those creative solutions that I love to see from the business community, just kind of putting on that hat of saying there's a problem, how do we solve it, and how do we kind of have a win-win for everyone. And that's a great one kind of in rural Kentucky. You might think of things like that in Louisville or Lexington or northern Kentucky, but here we are in rural Kentucky making sure that people have jobs and quality high child care.
You also mentioned during the panel discussion about some employers kind of stepping up when it comes to benefits, employee
Absolutely.
benefits, and contributing to FSAs to help families pay for child care because it's so incredibly expensive, rivaling the cost of a college education or, as we discussed on the panel, a mortgage.
A mortgage, yeah, it's very expensive. I said I've paid for 2 the last couple of years, so I know firsthand how expensive it can be, and I'm fortunate to have a job that affords me to do that, but it is very expensive. And so we're trying to talk to employers about looking at benefits package. The benefits package today may look different than it did 10, 20 years ago when it was just insurance in your retirement. A lot of employers offer gym memberships. Some offer, money for wellness programs. And this is kind of in that same mindset of what does the employee need and want. So finding out, I think, the employee's needs for childcare is really critical. And then talking to them about FSAs, talking to them about is there any subsidies they qualify for, making sure that you can be that resource for your employee to navigate the waters of childcare, I think, is really important.
Yeah, great, great. So it's nice to see the business community stepping up in that way.
Hopefully, yes.
Again, recognizing the need and then responding,
Right.
Trying to create solutions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Ashli, we look forward to working with the Chamber, continuing to work with the
Absolutely.
Chamber on the Business Education Roundtable and moving forward with these four goals, being creative and implementing some strategies that will result in a better economy and a stronger workforce,
Absolutely.
better educated population in Kentucky as we move forward. Thank you for the
Thank you
Chamber's
so
work.
much.
And
Thanks
thank
for
you for
having
doing
me.
this today.
Yes, thank you. This is great. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.